Hello, and welcome back to In Progress. I am your host, Raymond Perez. Today we are discussing my two favorite things, or close to it: antitrust policy, I know, very indulgent, and German politics. Yes. So, a brief history of this channel would let you know that Germany is probably the second most covered country on this channel, of course, after my homeland, the United States. But yes, I've covered German politics because that is a politics I know probably most outside of the US, maybe France and Canada. But I wasn't doing this show when the French election was going on, so Germany is the second most covered country on this channel. Uh, Now, I have also covered antitrust, but not that much. I covered it a lot more in 2021 because that was when the Biden administration was building up their antitrust division in the DOJ and the Federal Trade Commission with Lena Khan, Jonathan Cantor, etc. So I had to take a brief break because I was just so sad that I forgot to put my graphic on the screen. It was very funny to me. I was absolutely having a massive laugh just looking at it. And sadly, you do not have more than 10 seconds of seeing it. Oops, you live and you learn. Okay, moving on. Why Germany? Why now? So, first we need to look at the German ideological framework, right? How do they look at business? And something very important to note is that the German left and right, although they're similar to the American left and right, they're left and right, there are very major differences between the German right and the American right. So the German right tends to be more moderate. And a major reason for that is because when they were extreme, well, we know what happened. They went a bit too far, let's say. They weren't good. Now, the German right thus had to moderate. And a major way that they moderated was economically. So it should be noted that the German right, even since Otto von Bismarck, right, in the 1870s, had tended to be economically paternalistic. They would provide certain welfare policies like healthcare, etc. But this like German conservatism was, as I mentioned, paternalistic in the 1950s under Konrad Adenauer and his Christian Democrats. So after the Nazis were defeated, Konrad Adenauer created his Christian Democratic Party in order to oppose the Social Democrats on the left, and especially the communists on the in the east, but also, of course, to his left. So this Rhine capitalism basically was a form of capitalism that, of course, it was capitalistic. You had private ownership of the means of production, but you also had a very large, number one, welfare state, and a really important role for the state to intervene when market failures occurred. So this was basically Rhine capitalism in a nutshell. Okay, moving on. So, of course, the Christian Democrats are still basically in support of this Rhine capitalist model, especially under Angela Merkel, who was a moderate, but still very pro intervention in the economy. In fact, she is the one who passes this amendment in 2019. I should also note, though, that description of Merkel is, I mean, number one, I have the book on Merkel right here. It's holding up my microphone. But this description of Merkel is not necessarily the most accurate. But I just want to mention that Merkel does not oppose, and Merkel's Christian Democrats do not oppose state intervention in the economy. And I'm also kind of glossing over the 1990s with Helmut Kohl. But let's just say that's what's happening and move on. Okay, so now we have, of course, the growth of big tech, right? And that's really been a major issue, not just in America, and you definitely hear a lot about it in America, but also in the European Union. So there's been this movement, mostly in the United States, is how we talk about it, but outside of the U.S., it's also very important, and that movement is called the hipster antitrust movement. Now, first, I should note that that's not like the real name of it. In the U.S., it tends to be called the New Brandeis School after Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, who was very antitrust. But this new antitrust movement, which was named by Senator Orrin Hatch, who is dead now, but he was a Republican from Utah, president pro tempore at some point, retired in 2018, 2019. He basically said, this new movement is hipster antitrust because antitrust is really something relegated to the early 20th century. Now people are beginning to look at antitrust as a real thing that the state should be involved in, especially as I mentioned, maybe at the beginning. Lena Khan, Jonathan Cantor at FTC and DOJ, they are moving against the major big tech trusts like Facebook, Google, your antitrust companies. Okay, so that's happening in the US, but the EU is also moving against antitrust, and they're actually moving against it probably in a much harder way than we are here. So Germany and the European Union are both moving on antitrust. And it's important to note that the reason why they're doing this is because they view Facebook and Google and Apple and Amazon as beginning to be threats to number one, data privacy. So recently the EU passes the GDPR, which is this set of regulations that is supposed to protect European consumers from data, from what they view as breaches of data privacy. And that's what the EU is doing, right? But that something like that hasn't happened in the United States, primarily because legislation in the United States just doesn't pass very well. But anyway, this is happening in the EU and in Germany, and recently there was an amendment to the anti-competition law in Germany, which is called the Gesetz gegen Wettbewerbsbeschränkungen. Of course, the Germans love their words. Now, this basically allows the German government to distinguish and designate certain companies as paramount, as undertakings of paramount significance. I'm doing air quotes here, but you can't see me. And these undertakings are supposed to be very important for antitrust regulation. Now, the reason why is because basically you have large companies, right, who provide supposedly a decreased cost for consumers. Because when there is a major company, what they do is that they produce a lot of things, and that is called the economy of scale. And because they produce so many things, they can produce it at lesser cost, right? So the major issue, though, is that it seems as if these companies, although they may be producing things that people want for lower cost, they have too much power in doing so. So they're creating, so Amazon, for instance, it can undersell diapers from like the price that you would get at a different website, like let's say diapers.com, just making that up. I'm not, by the way. Now they can undersell diapers for less than the market price, and consumers will be more willing to buy diapers from Amazon. But Amazon, in cornering the diapers market, now gets to buy out diapers.com, now gets to get diapers.com shut down, and they have complete control of, let's say, the diapers market. Of course, that's at least the online diapers market, let's say. So that's very oversimplified. But the idea is, with companies like this, they do benefit from economies of scale. But they also benefit from economies of scope, meaning that they have a lot of different things that make them money. And they basically use those different things to consolidate their power. So in this recent complaint filed by the Bundeskartellamt against, or the Federal Cartel Office in English, against against Alphabet Inc., they're basically saying that Google benefits from these economies of scope. And they use what they call cross-promotional opportunities in order to gain power. So what that means is Google basically benefits itself, because let's say you have Google search, right? And you have Google News. So those two things are not necessarily related in the sense that you can have a search industry without having a news industry. But because you have both Google search and Google News, you can put Google News on Google search and make Google News the news agency, or it's really a news aggregate, but the news aggregate that people go to in order to get their news. And you can do that with many other things, right? But this is specifically the complaint filed in Germany. So the same thing is true with Google search and Google Maps, right? Because I have Google and I search something and I search a direction, right? I would get Google Maps. I won't get Apple Maps. I won't get Waze. I don't know what the hell Waze is, but I think it's a thing. I won't get these Uber Maps if that's a thing. I won't get them on Google Search because Google Search is integrated with Google Maps. So basically, Google benefits from these economies of scope. Now, another major important thing is that it has access to a broad database. It has a lot of consumers, right? And these consumers, they provide a lot of data. Now, the third thing is that they have a lot of highly sought after services and high numbers of daily and monthly active users. Similar thing to what number two is. Number two is more related to the data that it has, but number three is related to the fact that everyone uses Google search. 90% of searches go through Google. Right. It could be 87%. I don't know. But 90% of searches go through Google. And, I don't know how many people use Google a day, but it has to be in the hundreds of millions. So because of that, Google has cornered the search market, and they are very significant, and they need to be regulated, according to Germany. Next is the high level of vertical integration and the interconnectedness and complementary nature of the services across markets. That's basically what I discussed earlier, in the sense that vertical integration versus horizontal integration vertical integration is basically controlling the steps of the supply chain. So for instance, the normal thing people talk about is like steel mills controlling iron mines, controlling steel processing plants, etc. But in tech, you would have something like controlling the. I have to think of something here. It would be Amazon controlling, like, not just the diapers market, but also the shipping of the diapers, the warehouse where the diapers are stored, the diaper manufacturer themselves, etc. So that would be vertical integration. And the high revenues generated by its advertising. So of course, Google Ads, I think, is actually the number one moneymaker for Google. The same thing is true with Amazon. Its web services, it's actually more profitable than its actual retail. So that basically means that Google and Amazon and these other companies like Facebook, they are of paramount significance, and that means that they are acting, or that they have the ability to act in a way that is anti-competitive. So I should note, by the way, this is only one step of a two-step process. The first step is being labeled a company of paramount significance. The second step is then getting anti-competitive uh, regulations put on you. Okay, so let's talk about what big tech can do to strike back. And in doing this, I want to look at 2014 in Spain, when Spain basically told Google Maps, right, that it was beginning to act in anti-competitive in an anti-competitive way. And what Google did was it basically shut down Google Maps in Spain, right? And it did that for I think like 2 years actually. So Google Maps in Spain was shut down, but what does that mean for something like Amazon? Right? Can Amazon just completely shut out the EU? Well, no. Right. But could something else happen? Maybe some form of retaliation from big tech that hurts consumers, and that makes consumers then, go to their political leaders and say, "Hey, stop bullying big tech." I mean, that could theoretically happen, right? And then the other truth is that this bill was passed in 2019, right? And this is only happening beginning of 2023, that Google is being labeled a company of paramount significance, even though there have been motions filed in 2021. It took such a long time for us to even get to this situation. So if that happens, if it takes 5 years to do that, what does that even mean for the regulation itself? Will it still be relevant in a time where tech is so quick, and the tech industry is moving so quick? Like Facebook 20 years ago was not the monopoly it is today. Amazon 20 years ago was not the monopoly it is today. Google 20 years ago was not the monopoly it is today. So will these monopolies be the same, Or will they be different in 20 years? Who knows? I think the answer is probably not. So the conclusion here is that, oh my gosh. Okay. This is Annalena Baerbock, by the way, um, who was the chancellor's candidate for the Greens in 2021 when the election happened. She is, by the way, one of my favorite international politicians, just because she gets into a lot of weird. She gets into a lot of weird news stories. It's very funny. In fact, we have a few videos on Baerbock on the channel, and a few videos that were never captured about Baerbock that were on the radio show. So Baerbock, by the way, is someone I would have voted for if I lived in Germany. Of course, you don't vote directly for Baerbock, you'd vote for the list. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, the point is that this is Baerbock, but she's the foreign minister, and I put her there for a weird reason. I guess because she's. Anyway, I don't even understand, because Robert Habeck is the economic minister in Germany, and he's also a Green. So, okay, put that aside. Um, the point is that we must stand strong against monopolies in order to avoid a new Gilded Age. And people have predicted or said that we're even in a new Gilded Age, an age of massive inequality between rich and poor, an age where monopoly power is beginning to exact tolls on consumers, maybe not in price, but at least in data privacy and data collection. So we have to stand strong against these monopolies. And Germany is right to go against Google, but number one, they need to do it responsibly, in the sense that they need to ensure that that the trusts don't retaliate in a way that would make life for consumers worse. But even if they do, it's also important to ensure that that those types of retaliation are not too horrible for German consumers. Now, also, they need to fix the bureaucratic length. I mean, it's Germany, so you're going to have some bureaucracy, but they need to fix the bureaucracy in terms of setting, in terms of labeling a company a company of paramount significance. That certainly needs to change, because if you don't do that, you're going to get a lot of lag time and probably not too much enforcement. So with that being said, thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I finally remembered to say that at the end of these videos. And remember that the change we need to see is always in progress. Thank you for watching.